Never before in history has mankind faced the scale and intensity of economic, social, environmental, and political crisis that exists today. Donald Trump's re-election as President of the United States has caused a global political earthquake. The World Socialist website has characterised his presidency as of the oligarchy, by the oligarchy, for the oligarchy. It has been a mere 8 weeks since his inauguration, and as he promised, he has ruled as dictator from day one. The scope and speed of his enactments, bills and edicts are unsurpassed in history, outside of those of Hitler following his ascension to the Chancellor of Germany on January the 30th, 1933. The coming to power of fascist governments in the United States, Italy and Argentina, and the rise of the extreme right-wing forces is the turn of the ruling class to the most dictatorial and violent forms of rule. As was the case in the 1930s, when this process was last experienced, the German ruling class turned to Hitler to obliterate the fighting capacity of the German working class in order that it could prosecute war. Germany's war to redivide Europe was not possible without the defeat of the German working class. The war necessary for the United States to redivide the world, to re-establish its own hegemony, is not possible outside the defeat of the American and the international working class. David North, the International Editorial Board Chair and the chairperson of the US SEP, stated in a recently posted fund appeal that fascism is emerging as the new normal, growing like a malignant and metastasising tumour out of the crisis of American and world capitalism. Fascism is dictatorship in its most brutal form, emerging out of the concentration of staggering wealth in an oligarchy consisting of a few hundred mega millionaires and billionaires. Trump and Musk are themselves only the most grotesque personifications of the truly criminal ruling oligarchy. Trump, who both admires and has studied Hitler's rise to power and the rule of the Nazis, has emulated the Nazi conception of the state of exception, developed by Nazi jurist Carl Schmitt. This declares that under exceptional circumstances, the state of exception, the leader must be endowed with extrajudicial and parliamentary powers to deal with it, powers that he is not answerable to the Parliament for. This is called the Führer principle. In Germany in 1933, it was the Reichstag fire, which the Nazis seized as the pretext to create the conditions for the abolition of all democratic rights and the concentration in the hands of the Chancellor, Adolf Hitler, of all power without recourse to Parliament. This was the Enabling Act. In Trump's America, it is immigrants in the form of a purported invasion that has been the basis for his state of exception. And I will go through just briefly the speed, the scope of Hitler's measures that were undertaken following January the 30th, 1933. On the 27th of February, so not a month later, 1933, the Reichstag fire occurs, and the Nazis use it as the pretext to pass the Reichstag fire decree, which suspends civil liberties and allows for the arrest of political opponents. March the 23rd, 1933, the Enabling Act is passed, granting Hitler dictatorial powers. The Act allows Hitler to legislate without the Reichstag's approval, effectively ending democracy in Germany and establishing a one-party state. March 1933, Nazi Germany's first concentration camp for political opponents is opened at Dachau, near Munich. The camp, alongside others, is used by the Nazis to consolidate their power by eliminating political rivals, including communists and socialists. April 1933, the Communist Party, the KPD, is banned and its elected representatives jailed. May 1933, the socialists, trade unions and strikes are banned. October 1933, Germany withdraws from the League of Nations. In the following months, he trebles the size of the German army, ignoring the arms restrictions imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. And on June the 30th, 1934, the Night of the Long Knives, is a violent purge of the Nazi SA at the hands of the SS, further consolidating Hitler's power and allows him to eliminate all those he considers oppositional. The death toll in the Night of the Long Knives is estimated to around 150. Now, I will go through now what Trump has enacted. We have to remember he has been in power for 8 weeks. We have the rescinding of birthright citizenship, the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, which grants the President unchecked powers to detain or deport nationals of enemy states without due process, the purge of the Pentagon leadership to ensure the military is personally subservient to Trump as preparation for invoking the Insurrection Act. This act would allow Trump to mobilise active duty troops and the National Guard against protesters, strikers and political opponents, including US citizens. He has carried through the deportation of thousands of immigrants through raids and mass arrests and the use of the military to force them out of the US. He has declared that a state of war exists because the foreign drug cartels that he has been deemed as terrorists. Hundreds of Venezuelan migrants are deported in hog ties to El Salvador in defiance of a judicial order not to do so. It should be stated that the judge who has made such an order is himself now being threatened with removal, with action being taken against him. The use of Guantanamo Bay for immigration camps, concentration camps. Thousands of federal employees fired or forced out. The Department of Education is in the process of being dismantled. The Department of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid has their funding slashed. All funding has been frozen on virtually all grants and loans, both domestic and international. There has been the release of all 1,500 of the January 6 participants in the storming of the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Trade war measures against Canada, Mexico, the EU, Australia, China and many other countries. The imposition of 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium imports into the US. The declaration that he will seize Greenland, the Panama Canal and annex Canada. And the clearing of Gaza of all Palestinians and his announcement that he will seize it. In the implementation of this, Israel has cut off all food and electricity on March the 2nd with Trump's agreement. Israel has now begun bombing again of the Palestinians in the last 2 days, killing more than 600 people. This is dictatorship in action. It is being imposed with a speed and unrelenting wave to project a sense of an unstoppable train that overwhelms and terrorises the population. Now, while Donald Trump and Elon Musk are the face of the fascist administration, this is neither a personal nor an American phenomenon. It took Hitler 10 years from the beer hall putsch in 1923 to 1933 to become Chancellor. It has taken Trump 4, and he did not require a Reichstag fire, he did not require a new storming of the Capitol building to do so. Why? Because of the cowardly, fawning role of the Democratic Party, which has allowed Trump back into the office without so much as lifting a finger. And they have also allowed the billionaire Musk, this is the richest man in the world, to declare those on Social Security, those on Medicare, Medicaid are rorting the system and have carried out the theft of government money. The Democrats are not an oppositional party. They have no difference with Trump on the strategic program of the unprecedented assault on the working class. Their differences are tactical, and their differences lie on the issue of war in Ukraine. The Democrats, the party of war, the party of Wall Street, the party of the CIA, want to or see that Russia is the central opponent, that the war in Ukraine, which had nothing to do with the defence of little Ukraine, the defence of democracy, it is populated, its government is populated by fascists, by those who support Stepan Bandera, who carried out the Nazis and Hitler's bidding during World War II. What they want is the carve-up of Russia and the dismemberment of the Russian Federation. Trump has declared that he wants the resources of the US military to be concentrated against China. His aim is war against China. And it is on this issue that the differences have really intensified, as we saw with the clash between Zelensky and Trump in the White House some weeks ago. Trump's peace negotiations have nothing to do with peace and everything to do with seizing the rare earth minerals of Ukraine for itself. And one can see how very quickly the alliances, the friendships can disintegrate. In fact, what we have seen in the past really very rapid period is one which is characterised by the collapse of all the post-war alliances, the economic organisations, the trade pacts, and possibly even, to the horror of Australia, the military alliances and agreements. These mechanisms, this framework, was what was put in place following World War II in order to avoid the development of World War again. Not because any of these organisations or because capitalism opposes war, but they feared an uprising, an upsurge of the working class if there was yet a third war following quickly on the heels of 1945. All the organisations such as NATO, NAFTA, the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund are all poised either for outright collapse or the diminution of their size and role. The US's 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium have caused conflict with multiple countries, including Australia. The tariffs against Canada and Mexico will profoundly impact not only these countries, but the working class in the United States itself. Tariffs, as was evidenced prior to World War I and World War II, leads inevitably to trade war and military war. And the response of every country, including the EU, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and Australia, is to rearm. Military spending is slated to triple to $1 trillion in Germany under the newly elected coalition government. Friedrich Merz, the CDU leader, most likely to become the next chancellor, declared, "Germany is back." One only has to recall the last time that Germany was back was 1933. And that is precisely what he meant. France is to double or almost double its military budget, and the UK has announced an increase to 2.6% by 2027, being the largest increase in defence spending since the Cold War. All the talk of long-term partnerships and friendships have been replaced with the prospect of every country for itself. Alliances can become enmity almost overnight. In fact, we can see with the blow-up with Zelensky how that can happen and happen very quickly. But it would be a grave error to assume that these same processes are not taking place in this country. While Clive Palmer, who has taken over the far-right trumpet of the Patriots as a registered party, can be dismissed and is often done so by the media as a buffoon, that would be an error. His agenda, along with Gina Rinehart, who has become the spokesperson in Australia for Trump fascist agenda, is one of massive cuts to government spending, to social programs, to health, to education, in fact, anything that is a claim on profits or restricts the ability of these massively wealthy oligarchs to amass wealth must be eliminated. As is the case, again, with every other country, there is no fundamental differences within the political elite here. And so the rejection by the AEC of the SEP's party registration, which was carried out on behalf of the Labor government, was not because they thought that the SEP would change the outcome of the election. It wasn't that they thought that we would win seats in Parliament. They rejected our submission on a completely spurious and concocted basis because they did not, and they were afraid to give us an opportunity to project, to disseminate a socialist program of internationalist and working class program. The fact that the pseudo-left organisation, Socialist Alliance, played not a minor role in creating the conditions for the AEC to interminably extend the length of time they took to process our submission, is an expression of the role of these forces. Just to explain, there is a reactionary clause in the 2021 electoral laws which states the first registered party has veto powers over whether any other party is able to use the same words as the first registered party in their name. as Socialist Alliance was the first registered party, that clause was given to them. They took almost a month to inform the AEC that they would not utilise that right and block the SEP's right to use the word socialist, which, let's remind ourselves, we have used for 53 years. Now, it must indicate that there was discussion about whether they actually did that. Why else would it take? It is a principle. Any socialist party truly deserving of its name would have reacted immediately to reject such a state-ordained censorship power over another socialist party. We would not even have to discuss it. If the situation was reversed, we would not have to discuss it. It is a principle that we would never utilise such a measure against another socialist party. But they took almost a month. So why did the AEC reject our registration? Because there is an understanding within the ruling class of the widespread opposition and hostility to the government, to the coalition, and in fact to all the ruling parties. The wholesale support of the Gaza genocide of the Palestinians by the Albanese government has been a tremendous shock to millions of people in this country. The unbearable explosion in the cost of living in this country, which precludes whole sections, not just of the unemployed or the poor, but of working people, to be able to afford rent, housing, a mortgage, to buy a house. These are, as Max went through, the greatest reversal of the living conditions of the working class in this country since 1959. The attack on democratic rights, which has seen protests on university campuses, on the streets against Gaza, against other attacks which have been carried out, have resulted in a rejection and opposition by millions of ordinary people of the two main parties of rule in Australia. There is certainly justifiable and I think undeniable shock at Trump's illegal detention and the internment of immigrants, their only crime being born outside the United States. But in this country, during World War II, German and Japanese nationals were also interred for committing no crime other than being born in either Germany or Japan. They were referred to by Labor governments as enemy aliens. Just down the road at Holsworthy was one of these internment camps, in Berrima in New South Wales, in Victoria in South Australia. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Australia declared war on Japan, leading to the mass internment of Japanese residents. And these were naturalised subjects. These included Australian-born children and the wives of Japanese residents. Internment of German and Italian nationals also occurred, with some being sent to Australia for internment after being detained overseas by Australia's allies. Under the National Security Act of 1939, 69 opponents of the war were arrested, including members of the Trotskyist movement at that time. So under conditions of an attack on free speech, on an attack on the right to protest, the right to have a party's name on the ballot paper, why is there an assumption that Albanese and the Labor government will not proceed as their predecessors under conditions of war? The refusal to register our party is bound up with preparations for war. It is bound up with the suppression of opposition to war. And any conception that Labor is a lesser evil has absolutely no basis in reality. Labor in this country is the party of war. It has been relied upon by the ruling class since Federation. It is the party of war and of class assault. But there is a force that can defeat the rise of fascism, of dictatorship, and of war, and that is the working class. It cannot do so with the leadership which exists at present. The Labor Party, the trade union leaderships, the Greens, these organisations that we refer to as the pseudo-lefts, they all support in one form or other each other's actions and attempt to tie the development, the struggle of workers against capitalism to the coattails of Labor and of Parliament. The lessons of history have shown that the working class has fought for the overthrow of capitalism before. In Germany, 1918, 1990, 1923, the British General Strike of 1926, the Spanish Civil War of 1936, the revolutionary period from 1968 to 75. There was no lack of courage. There was no lack of determination. What there was a lack of was leadership. A revolutionary leadership with a party, with a program whose program is the overthrow of capitalism. These experiences must not be repeated. In order that that does not happen, we have to learn the lessons. Young people, workers have to learn the experiences of these bitter and tragic defeats that the working class has gone through. There is not some other force. There's not some magical other force. It is going to be reliant on workers, on young people, on ordinary people, drawing these lessons, making the decision that you become part of the fight of the resolution of the crisis of leadership. Youth play a decisive, absolutely decisive role, but by themselves, they cannot overthrow capitalism. It is the working class, the creator of all wealth, the only class which can, under this revolutionary leadership, overthrow capitalism. And that leadership is the Socialist Equality Party, the International Committee of the Fourth International, and I urge you, I call on you tonight to make the decision to join our party and take your place in this struggle. Thank you.